Crazy bastards or smarter and far less radical? When it comes to President Trump's take on Iran's leaders, who the F knows? Hey, he started it. What is known? Tomorrow's deadline holds, apparently. Strike a deal or be bombed back to the Stone Ages. Artemis II sets a new record for human spaceflight, flying farther than any crewed vessel away from Earth. Next, new pictures and perspectives on the far side of the moon. We wade deeper into the California governor's race. Republican Steve Hilton at the top of the polls and just endorsed by Trump joins us. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Look, I am not going to wade into the entire F-bomb thing that played out over the weekend. We have long grown accustomed to, and some of us, not me, but some of us have grown wary of President Trump's caustic relationship to the English language. That caustic relationship to the English language is by several orders of magnitude more profane this second term than it was President Trump's first term. So what matters? What matters is the president attached to this language leads the world's most powerful military and has at his disposal the largest arsenal of the most lethal weapons, conventional and nuclear, on Earth. And though the president said today Iran has presented a significant offer to end the war, that offer is not enough. And the president said if Iran does not meet his still unspecified terms by 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, he will unleash waves of bombing runs to inflict maximum damage on Iranian civilian populations.
We have a plan, because of the power of our military, where every bridge in Iran will be decimated by 12 o'clock tomorrow night, where every power plant in Iran will be out of business, burning, exploding, and never to be used again. I mean, complete demolition by 12 o'clock. And it'll happen over a period of 4 hours.
That could be an exaggeration. It could be a glimpse of destruction to come, or it could be hardball negotiating. On that last item, negotiation, the president, for whom exaggeration is tactical and distracting, sometimes both, said something quite curious about the state of actual dialogue with Iran.
In fact, the biggest problem we have in our negotiation is that they can't communicate. They have no method of communication. So we're communicating like they used to communicate 2,000 years ago with children, bringing a note back and forth.
A note back and forth? Carried by a child? Seriously? Well, probably not. Then why say it? Who the knows? What we did learn was important today. The Strait of Hormuz, quick reminder, that's the oil and natural gas shipment route from Iran to the Arabian Sea and from there to energy markets east and west, became much clearer today thanks to this question posed by my colleague, Weijia Jiang.
Just to clarify, in order for Iran to successfully meet your deadline tomorrow, do they have to make a deal, open the strait, or both?
We have to have a deal that's acceptable to me. And part of that deal is going to be we want free traffic of oil and everything else.
We begin tonight at the White House with the aforementioned Weijia Jiang. Weijia, great to have you. Lots of ground covered in the press conference this afternoon. We're going to talk to Aaron McClain in a moment about what we learned tactically about the rescue operations. I want to talk to you about other things that came up. First of all, the president made reference to this regime change in Iran, smarter, sharper, more reasonable. Is that something he really believes?
Well, it's something that he has been publicly messaging, Major. But to be frank with you, one of my questions on my list that was not answered during this briefing is, who are you talking about? Can we get a name?
Right.
Can we get a person? Because he has referred to the president of Iran's new regime, saying that person was the one who asked for a ceasefire last week. He has said that they are far more reasonable than the previous regime and that he is much more optimistic that they'll be able to reach some kind of deal. But we have no idea who he is talking about. Major. And so it's unclear why he is expressing this optimism. There is a speaker of Iran's parliamentary that could be the person, but that person has been very vocal, too, pushing back on Trump's rhetoric and saying, you know, we're waiting for you, essentially. If you escalate this war, we are here. So that is a great question, Major, one that unfortunately was not answered today, but an important one, because whether they are trading paper notes or, you know, using a tin can, they are talking to somebody, right? And that matters because the clock is ticking on that deal that the president wants by tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern.
And it was also asked of the president, what about the civilian population in Iran? He said he wasn't concerned about committing war crimes by hitting civilian targets like power plants or bridges or desalination plants. But he also said that the Iranian people, through intercepts the United States has, wants the United States to bomb the country more.
This was a remarkable moment, Major, because obviously in his threat that he issued online and that profane-laced tweet and verbally today about bombing power plants and bridges back to the Stone Ages, that would hurt the very people, the Iranian people, who the president has claimed repeatedly he wants to help. He wants them to rise up, to overthrow the regime, to have a chance at a better life. And he was asked specifically, what about these people? Why would they want you to bomb the civilian infrastructure? And you're right, Major. He said they would be willing to suffer in order to have freedom. The Iranians, we've had numerous intercepts. Please keep bombing, they are begging for, he says. So that's according to the president, that they're willing to make that sacrifice to endure what would come out of, you know, bombed bridges and power plants in order to ultimately have some kind of peace. That's what he's claiming.
Many things that are unprecedented in this particular era. Civilians saying bomb us more might be near the very top of that list. Weijia Jiang, North Lawn of the White House, thank you very much. Going to move around the set here as I walk over to our CBS News national security analyst, columnist for the Free Press, Aaron McLean, also host School of War podcast. We learned a lot today about this amazing, risky, tactically sound, I mean, like really sound rescue operation. What did we learn?
A bunch of extraordinary detail, Major, about the two rescue operations that were mounted between Friday and today. The first, a broad daylight, hasty, preloaded, sort of sprung-loaded operation, apparently led by Central Command, authorized by the president in the middle of the night, that flew into Iran with helicopters and C-130s taking fire along the way. The actual shoot-down now, we can't go into too much detail here because CBS News is still working on confirming some of these details, but it does appear that the plane went down further into the center of Iran than we thought on Friday. On Friday, there was a lot of discussion and speculation of this area kind of closer to the border with Iraq, because a lot of the footage that you saw on Friday of helicopters and C-130s in the air was in this area. But I think that's kind of explainable if you consider where those planes might have flown from, say from Kuwait to the center of the country, or if you're coming up from Qatar, but you don't want to fly all the way over Iran, you want to trace the Gulf and then go there. I think you can see then why you end up with a lot of footage from this region.
A quick reminder that what you see initially on social media may not be the full picture.
That's right.
Keep that in mind for a lot of different reasons.
A very true thing. So you have that first very bold daylight rescue operation, which swiftly gets the pilot. But then a long day on Saturday as we think somewhere in the hills in the vicinity of Isfahan. We've spoken about Isfahan before. You'll remember Isfahan because it's the site of one of the principal nuclear sites in Iran that we speculated a great deal could be a potential target for a raid. The pilot seems to have gone down in the terrain around Isfahan, very close to this site, and this forward base that was built by the United States Special Operations Command, Joint Special Operations Command, in the night Saturday into Sunday. Right. I think it's not crazy to imagine that that's a site that was pre-identified for other special operations we might execute in that region, and we ended up using it for this.
Right, and so they create this small base of operations, and what happened there? We learned some amazing stuff about what happened in not a nanosecond, but pretty quick.
Yeah, General Kane spoke very movingly about these Sandy missions that the A-10s and other aircraft run ahead to stay above the pilot and keep them safe while the rescue gets set up. At this forward refueling point out here in the desert of Iran, these planes landed. The president gave this vivid description of these helicopters. We can imagine these MH-6 Little Birds getting offloaded from the C-130s, assembled rapidly, and then flown out into the night to go to the top of the mountain where this aircrew member, this colonel, was hiding from the Iranians. Also, other air missions occurring in the vicinity to confuse the Iranians about the location of our airmen on the ground. And then, of course, disaster very nearly striking when the C-130s can't take off again. They're basically stuck in the mud at the site, thus leading to the launch of this second contingency operation, this Plan B, where new aircraft have to fly in, pick up our people, and we destroy the C-130s on the ground.
There is, just listening to you and from the briefing, there's like 3 movies in this.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Maybe a limited series.
Right. Because just very quickly, the colonel, he followed procedure, bails out, lands, and then gets to the highest point he can, waits a while before activating his transponder, all of that according to the training that backseater received.
That's right. And there's also this mysterious thread through the briefing today that we don't have every detail yet, but the president said a lot about it. The CIA director alluded to it, that the CIA played a big role in this operation, that there were human resources and technological resources employed. And just judging from the context of what the president said, it had to do with locating the pilot, or excuse me, the aircrew member at a great distance, being able to find this needle in a haystack. So I don't know if we're talking about a very high quality, high resolution optic, but something in that neighborhood where we were having trouble finding the guys, evidenced by the fact we didn't get him on Friday night. It took until Saturday night. Indeed, he wasn't flying out until dawn Sunday because of the trouble with the aircraft.
That's training, that's technology, that's personnel, and that's orders from the commander-in-chief. All came together to pull this off. Amazing stuff. Aaron McLean, thank you so much. The Artemis II crew has made history, breaking the record for traveling farther from Earth than any humans in history. Take a look at these spectacular images the crew captured while on the far side of the moon. As they prepared this morning to continue their voyage, they woke up to this message from one of the astronauts who paved the path they are now traveling. Listen.
Hello, Artemis II. This is Apollo astronaut Jim Lovell. Welcome to my old neighborhood. When Frank Borman and Bill Andrews and I orbited the moon on Apollo 8, we got humanity's first up-close look at the moon and got a view of the home planet that inspired and united people around the world. I'm proud to pass that torch on to you.
Passing the torch, indeed. CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassman joins me from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Mark, walk us through this amazing day.
Yeah, it really has been amazing, Major. Both the pictures they've sent back and, of course, and today, just a series of highlights. They've already gone farther, deeper into space than anyone ever has. They passed Apollo 13's record when they essentially eclipsed the 249,000 miles from Earth milestone. That of course, is significant. And now they are prepping for really what is one of the mission highlights, clear mission highlights, which is a loop around the Earth, loop around the moon, rather, the flyby. It's going to last for hours, but for 40 minutes while they're behind the moon, they will have no line of sight with Earth for their radio communications, which means radio silence. Radio silence for roughly 40 minutes. Everyone expects it. No one's particularly worried about it, but it's got to be an eerie feeling when 4 people are on one side of the moon and the rest of us are on the other side, and those two groups cannot talk to one another. So it's going to be an interesting period, and we're going to have a number of new images come back from the moon in time. The crew is expected to take 10,000 pictures of the far side of the moon while they're passing it. And it may be days before we get to look at those pictures, but they're going to see something that, in many cases, that we have never seen before.
And Mark, over the weekend, you had about 9.5 minutes to speak to the crew. And I loved the interview, every single word of it, so much so we're putting it on our podcast feed. So those many people who enjoy this show simply as a podcast will get to hear it later tonight. What was that like?
Well, it was was a little unusual, obviously, Major. I'm sitting right where I am now. I set a personal long-distance record for an interview, right? It was 180,000 miles between me and the crew. And just the chance to talk to them and hear what their latest thoughts were. And here's a piece of that conversation.
In the end, for me, it leads back to gratitude. Gratitude that out of this huge universe, we get to live together on Earth, planet Earth, and what an anomaly that is. When I saw Earth for the first time on its own out the window, I was struck by the blackness around it. If you can just think about what it means to be together and what it means to be apart from your loved ones during that time and reflect on that, maybe we'll all come to a realization.
So these astronauts are professionals. This is a scientific expedition. But I've noticed, Major, that the farther they get from the Earth, the more deeply they have been stirred emotionally.
That's a great point, Mark Strassman. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. Retired NASA astronaut Katie Coleman joins me now. She flew 2 space shuttle missions. One of them included a 6-month stay at the International Space Station. Katie, pick up on that part that Mark just mentioned because if you listen to the interviews, read them all, as the astronauts on Artemis II have talked to various journalists, the farther they get away, the more moved they are by this thing, not just philosophically, but emotionally, moving away from the science just a bit to what is deeper within them as they regard the universe.
I think all of us, kind of skate this line between the science and the job, and knowing that every data point brings us closer to exploring and having humans live on Mars, to being a human being present right where you are. And this crew, I think, is really just so wonderful. The whole way they have brought us along. Jeremy's wife, posts about, just some of the different training. I mean, they've involved their families. And so hearing these things, we're hearing what they really think, who they really are. I think it's so generous of them. And when I see the headlines that say astronauts, surpass the distance record, they are bringing all of us with them. And that means a lot to me, especially in these days.
Absolutely. And the science of it is also super important, because these photographs that Mark mentioned, 10,000 on the far side of the moon, they're going to help the next phase of all this, because they're going to give us a better understanding of what's there, how to relate to it, how to land there, and how to inhabit it.
Exactly. And it's also their observations with their own eyes and their analysis at the same time. I think all of us, looked up at the moon and wanted a photo of it. And then when you look at your photo, you're like, that's not what I see. And, I don't mean to make, light of it. But I think it was Victor was saying, OK, I'm looking at the North Pole, I'm looking at the South Pole. I think on the North Pole, those are navigable, but it's going to be difficult. On the South Pole, this is more craggy. And they really see different things with their own eyes. And no one's been able to do that yet. And it is paving the way for future attempts.
That's really important, because a probe can do this, an automatic camera can do this, but a trained set of eyes, 4 different trained set of eyes, will bring back not just the photographs themselves, but the human perspective on what, as scientists, as astronauts, as observers, they saw in real time. That's got to be important.
Just listening to the comm between Houston, where the scientists are all in what they call the science evaluation room, something like that. I mean, it's clear that they are, when they hear something from the crew, they're like, oh, that is exactly what we've been wondering about. And they are not just saying that. And these groups are used to conversing. It's as if they've been having dinner together for years, partly because they have done that probably for the last 2 years.
That is fantastic stuff. Katie Coleman, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Still to come on The Takeout. 5-year-old Liam Ramos's detention in January, lots of photos about that, drew widespread and unfavorable attention to ICE tactics, specifically related to parents. Liam and his family spoke exclusively to CBS News correspondent Camilo Galvez Montoya. Also, the crowded race for governor in California, Republican Steve Hilton, just endorsed by President Trump. He's going to join us live shortly. Plus, Huskies or Wolverines? It's not a dog show. It's not a Marvel movie. It's Connecticut and Michigan for the men's basketball national championship. What to know before tip-off. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. 5-year-old Liam Ramos and his family did not ask to become part of America's immigration debate, but that's where they found themselves in January, when Liam and his father were taken into ICE custody. They've since been released. Family's immigration status, however, remains up for grabs. Our Camilo Montoya Galvez traveled to Minneapolis and spoke exclusively with Liam and his family.
Liam Conejo Ramos is in many ways just like any other 5-year-old boy.
La pizza.
You like pizza, okay? ¿Qué tipo de pizza? What type of pizza do you like?
Pepperoni.
Pepperoni.
But what he doesn't yet understand is that his story is at the center of America's polarizing immigration debate. Images of Liam, confused, standing alongside ICE agents on a cold Minnesota afternoon in January, sparked national and global outrage. His father, Adrian Conejo Arias, had just picked up Liam from school.
ICE has told us that you tried to escape, flee, evade arrest, and that you abandoned Liam in the process. Is that accurate?
No es verdad lo
It's
que
not true.
dicen las personas, no.
ICE claims Liam's mother, Erica, refused to take him, but she says she feared the whole family would be detained.
Do you believe ICE was using Liam as bait?
Sí.
Yes, you do.
ICE transferred Liam and his father to a family detention facility in Texas, accusing them of being in the U.S. illegally. The family from Ecuador says they entered the country legally at a port of entry in 2023 under a Biden administration program.
Lo más difícil es que no podía hacer nada.
You couldn't do anything. You were powerless.
After 2 weeks, a federal judge ordered them released, but the government is still pushing for their deportation, recently terminating the family's asylum case and asking the court to allow ICE to detain them once again.
Entonces creo que fue una injusticia que nos hayan hecho eso, cuando en realidad sí estábamos haciendo todo bien.
Now back home, Liam is seeing a psychologist, and his parents say he seems to be a different boy.
What are you scared about the most?
La migración.
Immigration. ICE.
Camilo joins me now from Minneapolis to discuss this further. Camilo, what's next for Liam and his family?
Hi, Major. Well, a recent incident allowed the immigration judge at the Justice Department level to terminate the family's asylum case. That is now actively under appeal. But the family attorney tells us, Major, that if that appeal fails and is unsuccessful, the family could very well be detained again by ICE and processed for deportation to their native country of Ecuador. That is the legal peril that the family is still facing. Additionally, the administration is also trying to process the family for detention once again, even before that determination is made by the Justice Department. In addition to that, the family is obviously still dealing with the psychological trauma that they say Liam is still suffering from, Major.
Camilo, did anything in any of the family members' background fall into the category of worst of the worst?
It's a critical question, Major. From what we can gather, the administration has not been able to provide any evidence that any member of the family, including Liam's father, who was the original target of that January operation that led to the boy and the dad to be detained, has any criminal record. We understand that the family was able to enter the U.S. back under the Biden administration under a system for asylum seekers known as CBP-1. And that system allowed people to use a smartphone, Major, to request a time to enter the U.S. legally along the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, the Trump administration has said ever since that that program, which it shut down almost immediately last year, was illegal, and that the people who came under it were by effect, also illegal in this country. But their case is still ongoing. They cannot be deported just yet, but that is still an open question whether or not the family will be able to stay here legally, Major.
Coming to us from Minneapolis, Camilo Montoya Galvez. As always, sir, I'm grateful for your help. Thank you. Next, California Republican candidate for governor, Steve Hilton, joins me live, fresh off the endorsement, happened overnight, from President Trump. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Overnight, President Trump posted on social media who he wants to succeed Gavin Newsom as next governor of California. He endorsed former Fox News host Steve Hilton, who is one of two Republicans still in the race. Now, despite the fact that Democrats vastly outnumber Republican voters in the state, we'll get to that in a minute, the conservative commentator has been leading in many of the polls. One of the reasons, well, there's 8 Democrats running, and they're sort of dividing and splitting up the vote. Steve Hilton joins me now. Steve, let's just jump right to the end. You win. You're governor-elect. But as I look at my numbers here, the California Assembly, 60 Democrats, 20 Republican. The Senate, 30 Democrats, 10 Republicans. If you are governor, would you have to compromise with them, and how would you go about that?
Well, I would be putting forward to them the same plan that I'm putting forward to the voters, which they will have chosen in the situation that you've outlined, which is totally positive and practical, not ideological, not particularly partisan. And here it is. We are going to make our state Cal-affordable. And here are the elements of that. $3 gas, cut your electric bills in half, your first $100,000 tax-free, a home you can afford to buy. And the reforms that are necessary for that will be in my first budget, which I send to the legislature. And I would hope, especially after all the lectures from Democrats about how much they care about our democracy, that they wouldn't want to undermine or overturn the will of the people who would have just voted for that. And so I look forward to working with them to implement the agenda that the people of California would have just voted for.
So partisan alignment is pretty structured in California, blue versus red, lopsidedly so. The Proposition 50 vote just held, 64 for favoring, 35-5 against. Was that not a sort of proxy for partisan orientation in California?
Not really, because that vote was a one-off special election over some obscure gerrymandering plan that was shoved together at the last minute, really, to promote Gavin Newsom's presidential campaign. It wasn't really about the issues that are driving people crazy in California. The fact that we got the highest cost of living in the country, highest gas prices, electric, rent, taxes the highest for the worst results, housing costs the highest in the country, crime, homelessness, the schools were a disaster. Life is a real struggle for working people, in particular in California, for small business owners, as I've been most of my career. And so that's what this election is going to be about. And that's why I'm confident that we can win, even though, as you say, it's been a long time since a Republican's won statewide in California. It's actually 20 years. But we've got a couple of things that really help us this year with the Republican turnout. And top of that list is voter ID. There's a ballot initiative that will be on the ballot in November to require voter ID in California. That is something that Republicans are very enthusiastic about. So I'm confident that while it's not going to be easy to win against the Democrat machine, people are so sick of the nonsense in California that this could be the year when we provide a bit of a shock and a political revolution here in our Golden State.
Steve, let me talk to you about your Riverside County opponent, Republican Chad Bianco, who was on this program last week. And I asked him about you, and he said why he's better is because he has a lifelong, irrefutable record of public service and Republican conservative values. I'm quoting him now. And Steve Hilton does not. His views have completely changed for his own personal benefit or political benefit. How do you respond?
Well, I don't really know what he's talking about, but the real, you can read my views and see them. I don't think there's many people who've actually run for office with more of a public record of what they've been saying the years that I've been on the national stage in the media here in California. Before that, in business and in politics in the UK, I've written 4 books over the years, all with a very consistent theme, which is that we've got to put power back in the hands of the people. Big centralized bureaucracy is a disaster everywhere it's been tried. My parents were Hungarian and they were refugees from communism. So I was brought up in a working class household in England before moving here in 2012 with my wife and my sons. And I've been totally consistent about that. And all the things that I've argued, the reform, I worked for a while back in the day in the UK government. I was senior advisor to the Prime Minister. You could look at the reforms that I worked on there and helped to implement, all about pushing forward those common sense views on restraining the overmighty role of government in our lives. And so I don't really know what he's referencing there. But in any case, the real point is that we have to get united everyone who wants change in California. And it's not just Republicans, it's independents, many Democrats. We're doing town halls up and down the state, have been since the beginning of the year. Many Democrats are coming to those. People who voted for Kamala Harris and say, yeah, I used to be a Democrat and probably still am a Democrat, but we've got to have some change in California. 16 years of one-party rule. It's not healthy. Some balance is needed in our system. And so I'm interested in hearing what this Republican candidate has got to say.
Steve Hilton, I hope this is not the one and only conversation we have before November. You're always welcome back on the program. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
For sure. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Next is Ohio Republican Congressman Jim Jordan angling quietly to replace Speaker Mike Johnson in the House leadership should House Republicans fall out of the majority. Well, there's been some reporting about that, and our political panel weigh in. When we come back, you're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Political panel time. Isn't it exciting? Bringing a Democratic strategist, CBS News contributor Joel Payne, and CBS News political director, the one and only Finn Gomez. All right, iron rule of this show. If I tease to it, I got to talk about it right off the top. So Politico has a piece. Headline: Jim Jordan's dream might not be deferred much longer. The Ohio Republican will be well situated if Republicans lose the House majority. Oh, congratulations, Jim Jordan. You get to become minority leader. What do you know about this, Finn?
Well, look, there's been a lot of chatter coming from the Hill.
Jim Jordan was someone who was in the Speaker Derby before, fell short, but has always been biding his time.
Yeah, against McCarthy in 2022. He never got that 2018 threshold that you needed. Right. But look, there's been some chatter coming from the Hill that if the Republicans lose the House in November, which a lot of people are predicting they will, there's going to be a fight for new leadership, right? And I think Jordan is someone who's been talked to a lot about that.
And Mike Johnson might not have his heart into being the minority leader.
No, exactly. And, he's been a fan favorite of the MAGA base for a long time. House Freedom Caucus, he's a close ally of President Trump. And also, when you're in the minority, you also need, the thinking is that you need someone who has a more confrontational style, and he definitely does have that.
No doubt. Joel, any thoughts?
I wish them all the best of luck.
In their minority status, he says, as the resident Democrat.
I guess what I would say is Mike Johnson, it seems like his primary qualifications for the job is that Donald Trump allows him to keep it. I imagine Jim Jordan, over a longer period of time, over a longer time in leadership, has more pelts on the wall, has more favors built up, has more confidence from that Republican conference on that side. So I would imagine if it's Jordan, if it's somebody else, if it's Emmer, who's made a bit of a comeback in the Trump universe.
Tom Emmer, the majority whip.
I think Mike Johnson is going to get a challenge in that leadership.
I also want to bring to our audience's attention, in case you missed it over the busy weekend, something posted by former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to read some of it. I know all of you and him and he, and this is a reference to the President of the United States, has gone insane. And all of you are complicit. The strait, meaning the Strait of Hormuz, is closed because the U.S. and Israel started the unprovoked war against Iran based on the same nuclear ties I think that's lies, they've been telling for decades that any moment Iran would develop a nuclear weapon. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the fallout and the falling out, rather, with Trump, if it wasn't complete before, it is complete now.
No, absolutely. And I think, look,
this is the weekend before the runoff in Georgia.
Tomorrow's runoff
to
succeed her. The reason she's not there anymore is because of that political fallout that she had with President Trump. One of his staunchest allies is now one of his sharpest critics. Especially within the Republican Party. And look, the president has the backing of the MAGA base. Again, he does. We've seen that in our own polling. But there's an enthusiasm gap right now that you see between both parties. Republicans lack that enthusiasm right now. You're seeing that in the polling. And I think what she's talking about is to that base that does feel disaffected over what's happening in Iran, something that he adamantly campaigned against in 2024. So I think there is a part of this base that's growing louder in its criticism on the foreign front, and it's typified by MTG.
And Joel, the longer this goes, the more those strains are likely to become evident.
I think that's right. 2 points. One, I did almost 3 years in Harry Reid Senate Majority Leadership Office. Words matter, particularly in working communications, not just because you're a public official and people look to you for leadership, but because the markets other members of Congress, other countries are looking to American leaders for signaling. The fact that the president sounds unhinged and sounds like an untrustworthy messenger is a problem for this country. Two, all of the issues that Donald Trump is dealing with, we're talking about Iran right now, but big, beautiful bill, ICE in the streets, these are all things of his making. These aren't exogenous events that are happening to Donald Trump.
Implying,
these are choices
not saying directly
that he is making.
That future investments of health care are unaffordable because we need to prosecute the war.
His choices, his judgment is failing the American people, and it's becoming clearer and clearer every day.
Let me talk to you about California. Steve Hilton just on the program. 8 Democrats still in that primary field. That field has got to shrink, and someone's got to tell them to shrink it. Who's that person going to be?
Honestly, Donald Trump might have just did the best solid for Democrats in that race, because if he consolidates Republican support behind Hilton, Bianco is pushed to the side and is bumped out of the top 2. That's actually the thing that Democrats need, because right now, most public polling suggests the top 2 candidates in that race in the California's jungle primary are going to be Republicans. I think Democrats still have time to kind of get their act together. I'm a big fan of primaries, but Democrats are going to have to unify around at least 2 or 3 candidates and not 8.
And if you
have 3
still
levels
muddling
of
at
Democrats
3%, at some point you got to pull the plug.
Probably, yeah.
Look, I think
Ben, you got 20 seconds.
Yeah, points for Joel for using exogenous in his answer.
Yes,
that was very
we
impressive.
love SAT words here at Nerdville, USA, otherwise known as the Takeout.
I know. I just want to echo what Joel said. I think the best thing that happened for Democrats in this jungle primary was the president endorsing Hilton today, because it's going to clear the field and make a Democratic and Republican option, and ultimately in this very blue state, it looks good for the Democrat.
And the president did not need to weigh in this early. This weekend, he's fighting a war in Iran, doing all this stuff, the rescue operations, and he jumps in, and he may have done the solid for the Dems. Joel Payne, Finn Gomez. Love the no-tie stuff.
Let's go.
Can Danny Hurley, either way, lead UConn to their 3rd title in 4 years? We head to Indianapolis to talk to college basketball insider Jeff Goodman about what the Huskies need to do to upset Michigan, or maybe not, if you're watching the Takeout. Welcome back. In case you didn't know, a new men's college basketball champion will be crowned tonight in Indianapolis. It is the University of Connecticut versus Michigan. UConn, the Huskies as they like to be called, looking to bring home their 3rd title in 4 years. Quite a run they've been on. A win for Michigan, the Wolverines, would be their first championship since 1989. Longtime college basketball insider Jeff Goodman, I'm very happy to see him, joins me now from Indianapolis. He is the co-owner of the Field of 68. Jeff, we'll get to tonight's game in a second, but you know there's this dialogue about the crisis of college sports, that it's really off the tracks, that NIL, name, image, and likeness, the changing of the geography of the conferences, all of it is sort of hurting college athletics at the Division I level, and yet, still a great tournament. Still a great tournament.
Well, the product on the court, Major, has actually gotten better, because what it's done is the money has allowed guys like Michigan's Yaxel Lendeborg, who is going to be a late first-round pick, to come back to college and make as much, if not more, money. It's also allowed the influx of international players that are allowed to, again, come over here and make a lot more money than they do, back home. So I think that's what it's really done is the product's better on the court, but off the court, it is a complete mess right now with the transfer portal. The portal opens tomorrow, officially, okay? There's already over 1,200 players that have publicly announced themselves or through their agents that they will enter the portal. Last year, there were a total of about 2,400 players that went in the portal, and this year that number will be higher. I can guarantee you that.
The Saturday games for the national semifinals, kind of disappointed. I was very much looking forward to both those games. They turned out to be a blowout, both of them. Tonight, I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I think this is a well-coached UConn team, probably outmanned by Michigan, but still, I think it's going to be close.
No, you hit it right on the head. UConn's got the best coach right now in the country in Dan Hurley. I mean, he's going for his 3rd national title in 4 years, and to do it in this day and age with, again, as you mentioned, the transfer portal, the changing rosters, NIL, having different players come in and out of the program over the last few years. The one constant, obviously, has been Alex Caravan, who's been absolutely terrific and a rock for Dan Hurley. He's done an incredible job, but they are overmatched. I mean, Michigan, I've watched this team 6 times in person this year. I have yet to see anybody play a game with the Wolverines. I mean, three games in Vegas. They beat Gonzaga by 40. They beat San Diego State by 40. They beat Auburn by 30. They just beat who everybody thinks is the number 2 team in the country, second best team in the country, Arizona. I mean, they had them the whole way. It was never a game.
And when they say, Michigan, we have 9 starters, I have become a believer in that. College basketball does not typically operate on an idea of a team 1 and a team 2. You usually have a team 1 and maybe 1 or 2 extra players who can come off the bench and add some spark. Michigan has 4 players that can come off the bench who could start for them under abnormal circumstances.
And the craziest part, Major, they lost their backup point guard, LJ Kaysen, to a season-ending injury about a month or so ago. And he was a guy who could probably start for 330 of the 360 teams in America. But like you said, Trey McKinney comes off the bench, and he was sensational in the last game. It gives them that depth that they need, especially right now where you don't know how healthy Yaxel Lendeborg is going to be. I think he's going to be fine. You know, he got the ankle, the knee. He's banged up, but a lot of guys are banged up. His story is absolutely amazing. What a great kid. And also a heck of an interview because he's got no filter whatsoever.
We love interview subjects who have no filter. Jeff, you mentioned Yaxel Lendeborg's injury. A couple of other players are going to be nursing other injuries. And what I've been struck through this entire tournament, the intense physicality of the games, how strong the players are, and how many guys who have played at a very high level nursing either low-level injuries or mid-level injuries that under normal circumstances would keep them out of the game.
Yeah, and Silas Demery is one of those guys, UConn's starting point guard, playing with significant leg injury right now. And he's joined by Solo Ball, who got injured in the last game with a foot injury, a sprained foot. But I'll say this. Usually you could tell by the look of Dan Hurley's face, like how significant these injuries are. I don't think he's worried about Solo Ball's injury. Silas Demery's been dealing with this for a long time. And, man, he's given everything he has. I just worry. I worry about this UConn team. Everything has to go just right for them, Major. And one of the 2 things for me are they better make shots from deep, right? Braylon Mullins, their freshman who lives right down the street here from Lucas Oil, he's been great in the tournament. Solo Ball's been up and down all year. And Alex Caravan has to make shots too. And then another key, Terrace Reed, their big guy who's been an absolute beast in the tournament, has to stay out of foul trouble because those Michigan bigs, man, they are big, they are strong, they're athletic, and they have a lot more size and length than Terrace Reed.
Well, Michigan could hear from Michigan State because it knows that Alex Caravan can hit a shot when it counts the most. Jeff Goodman, great to see you. Enjoy tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. Happy Monday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. Daily Report coming up next with their 2-hour special on the Artemis II mission.